Welcome to Season 2 of On the Road to Literacy Success, the podcast that spotlights educators and researchers dedicated to reducing the messiness of teaching and learning. I'm your host, Dr. Staci Bain, and I couldn't be more thrilled to kick off this new season with a guest that's no stranger to this podcast. Today, we're zooming back to Australia to sit down again with this well-known researcher, author, speech pathologist, and dad. Dr. Swain's bio website and details on how to grab his brand new book will be linked to the show notes. When I saw Dr. Swain's June 27th, 2024 blog entitled Whole Class Teaching is Not One Size Fits All and watched educators' overwhelming response to our first podcast recording, I knew we had to ask Dr. Swain to come back and be our opener for Season 2. Without further ado, here's our special guest, Dr. Nathaniel Swain. Dr. Swain, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Staci. It is an absolute pleasure. I can't wait to get into the discussion today. It is just a joy to shoot the breeze with you.
Excellent. The feeling is mutual. So since we last spoke, you've really resonated with educators. In fact, on one social media post alone, over 100,000 people viewed it when you said we should have strong tier one. That really resonated. So with that, what have you been up to? What has happened in the last year?
So I've been really fortunate over the last 6 to 12 months to spend a lot of time working closely with schools and classrooms and teachers basically perfecting some of these amazing practices. What I love about this work is that it's messy, but it's also incredibly strategic. And schools and teachers can be continually refining and also experimenting with their practice so that they can get their instruction just right. I'm so passionate, as you know, about getting that tier one instruction absolutely mint. And the way to get there, I've found with a lot of schools and the conversations we've been having have been about how to cater for, all the differences you might have in the classroom. People are adjusting from small group instruction as the first port of call to guided reading or reading rotations or centers as the first port of call. And it's a bit of a shock to the system, if you like, for a lot of schools, even if they know that tier one instruction is the starting point, small group instruction afterwards. They still get that thing and that awkward sort of moment in a lot of their lessons where half the class has finished the question or the task. They might be hovering their whiteboards, as we talked about last time, and the other class is not finished. They're still going and they still need more support. And I've been working with schools over the last 6 months on one of those big themes, which is how to manage that moment in your lesson and in the independent part of your lessons as well.
Nice. Have you done any traveling? Tell us about that.
Well, this adventure of teaching does take me beyond Australia, which is great. I've had the great privilege of heading over to New Zealand and meeting their Minister of Education, who's incredibly impressive and is implementing a lot of these practices in New Zealand schools. I've also had the great honour of attending the first Core Knowledge National Conference for at least, I think, 5 or 6 years and meeting the founder of that foundation, E.D. Hirsch Jr., who was just an absolute amazing sort of figure in the space regarding the importance of explicit teaching as well as knowledge-rich curriculum. I also rubbed shoulders with people like Dylan William and Daniel Willingham and some incredible people who also have other podcasts, such as Susan Lambert. And look, I was really blown away by all the American teachers and educators that I met and just am so excited about teaching in general across the world.
Yes, and I love how you purposefully did not mention that you also published a book.
Just very humble, yeah. I was so thrilled, I think, at the response from this book. It came out in late October or early November last year. I've just had word that it's now released as an audiobook on Audible. So if you're a busy teacher harnessing the science of learning, you can get it on Audible as well as any other audiobook app. And then the book itself, I think I've been blown away by people's feedback. Staci, your feedback has been incredible and has been so helpful for thinking about what's next and what to do. And I'm actually really excited to announce, it's okay if I announce something right now.
Sure.
I'm announcing a professional learning platform for teachers in Australia, but also around the world that will allow them to access the content that's wrapped up in places like books and podcasts and blogs and allow them to access those bite-sized pieces of knowledge and expertise so that they can start implementing it right then and there in their classroom. It's going to be called Luminary, and Luminary is a place that you can go to get access to high-quality learning that is for you or for your colleagues in your school.
Oh, that's going to be so incredibly helpful. The world needs more of you, Nathaniel Swain. The conversations about how we can support real teachers in real classrooms, real principals in real schools. It's the application of what we're doing. And my old superintendent used to say, you grow the big people to grow the little people. And I love how you are so invested in growing the people who are serving, who are doing their utmost. So how very exciting. So Luminary.
Luminary, it's coming. Watch this space. You can join the newsletter if you want to hear the first thing about it. I'll be doing some testing with some people in the next few weeks to basically get it as good as possible for a launch in later sort of October, September. Also, I should mention, I also started a podcast in the last few
Yeah,
months.
you did.
Yeah. So a podcast is called Chalk Dust. It's with my amazing colleague in Sydney. Her name is Rebecca Birch, and she's a secondary English teacher. And we're bringing the primary and the secondary together and having great conversations like we're talking about here about teachers in real classrooms doing the hard yards and also really refining their practice over time.
You have been busy.
A little bit.
We'll get to your family later on in the questions. And then also, I'd love for you to share a little bit later some golden nuggets from your book, if you would like.
Love to.
So in the United States of America, teachers are also busy right now. They're getting back into their classrooms. So how about this? Why don't we speak directly to new teachers? We have new teachers listening on the line. What advice, what words of encouragement would you provide to people who are just starting out their first year of teaching, right out of teacher preparation? What would you have to say to the new teacher in the classroom?
I would say that the start of your trial by fire begins now, but there's so much you can do before you really sort of throw yourself in that deep end. And I'm hoping at this stage in the year that you are thinking about how you're going to set up your classroom, how you might understand your learners before you bring them in. I remember in the weeks before I had my kindergarten classroom for the very first time, it sort of had that opportunity to build that culture from the ground up. I was reading books on routines. I was looking at work by Tom Bennett on running the room. I'm looking at the very best ways of pairing my students and organizing the materials and making it really, really easy for students to get the most out of every day. So the big thing to invest in as an early teacher is the teaching of routines and high expectations, and also knowing your curriculum. So knowing what you're trying to teach in those first few weeks and how you can make those lessons every single time, like hit the mark and be fun, exciting, but also incredibly effective. So if you don't feel confident about what you're teaching, like do that intellectual preparation, do that work of looking at the curriculum materials you've got, looking at what resources you've got already and feeling confident about all the technical parts. Like how do I get the PowerPoint to move forward? How do I find the whiteboard markers to model things here? When do I get the mini whiteboards out? When should I get out some counters to sort of model the sounds or sound boxes, for example? And doing that work, whatever kind of teacher you are, you could be doing this in any year level and any subject, really to sort of get into the mental space is really important. And knowing that if you want students to be able to do something, so be able to have that a certain behavior or achieve a certain goal and how you want your classroom culture to be, that is something that you can teach. So everything is teachable, and even the way in which students respect each other, the way in which they interact with each other. You can model, demonstrate, rehearse, explicitly guide, and give feedback on all of those learning behaviors that support great classroom teaching. Because when you're first coming into the classroom, it is overwhelming. It's a lot to hold in your mind, and you want to ensure you've got all your list of things lined up of what you want to tackle and how you want to go about it. And the first few weeks of your school year in your first classroom will actually be a lot of setup, if that makes sense. Setup of routines, setup of processes, setup of procedures, and getting to know your students and how they're going to respond to you as you're getting to know yourself as a teacher.
That's a good word. What if we zoomed out for a moment? I was just speaking to a new principal today, and she said, I'll be teaching second and third grade until we get a second and third grade teacher, but then I'll move into being a new principal. What would you say to that new school principal? What would you say to every single new school principal walking into that?
Yeah. And look, really trying to understand the space that you're in, because schools are like ecosystems, right? I think in the classroom, it's complicated. There's some variables that you can pull, but you can basically optimize that little space. If you get it working well, if you have a strong view and vision of what you want your classroom to be like, running the school is like running many little sort of areas and many little classes that then are connected together in an ecosystem and often have a history as well. So if you're coming into a school, you've got a strong agenda. It's not always as simple as buying a program and saying, off we go. It's actually about trying to understand where teachers are at in their understanding and their knowledge. Often, if they haven't heard of things from the science of reading, if they haven't looked at instructional sort of things from the science of learning, all of this stuff that you might want to implement might be completely foreign or might be seen as really backward or really old school. So it's about understanding how you could pitch the change so that you can have a shared vision with your staff. So the thing that you really need to set up for is, what are my quick wins? So as a principal, like, what can I get across the line that is a small change, a doable change, something that will still make a big difference and get people excited about the change? But then also, as a school leader, you want to be ensuring you know what the long-term plan is. It's not just grab the next shiny thing and see how that goes. It's, well, installing this phonemic awareness or phonics program as my first sort of step, as well as a thing that's going to take care of the handwriting. Those are my initial sort of goals, but that's actually building up to a much bigger sort of change in, say, comprehension, or how we're teaching vocabulary or knowledge, or doing a whole writing revolution sort of long-term plan potentially. And if you don't know what that long-term plan is, it's hard to sort of backwards map it. So you want to have those bigger picture ideas in your head and then work backwards from there and say, well, what can I start with that's going to be successful and that lays the foundation for what will be probably a huge change. And just expect that the status quo bias is a bias we probably don't talk about enough, but that's the bias in all of us, that we actually prefer for things to stay the same, keep the status quo. That's really strong. And teachers aren't always going to just jump at the idea of change. So you almost need to build them up to it. You need to give them opportunities to see small change leading to positive outcomes that then might lead to bigger changes later, and also to be there as an emotional and a intellectual support for your staff, because they want to feel like you're in it for the right reasons. You're not just trying to meet your KPIs. You actually care about the outcomes in the school community that you're trying to build.
Beautiful. Very helpful. So here's one about whole class teaching.
Mm-hmm.
So you and I agree that whole class teaching isn't about one size fits all, as you wrote last year. It's about holding high expectations for every student, giving access to every student, access to rich and powerful instruction.
Uh-huh.
For the teachers and leaders out there, and you alluded to this at the top of our time together, for the teachers who are still a little bit hesitant about fully leaning into strong, whole group, dynamic, diagnostic, interactive, flexible, turn on a dime type of instruction followed by small group, as you mentioned, what would you say and what do you say to help people shift their thinking?
So the first step in being a much more adaptive, responsive, and explicit sort of teacher, the way that you've described, and those fantastic other adjectives you threw in there, the first step in doing that at the whole class level is to try and, simplify the process for yourself as a teacher, because it's not just about student cognitive load, it's about teacher cognitive load. There's only so many things you can teach at once, or only so many things you can master in your practice at once. So start with little things like, what are my opportunities to respond? How can I include more engagement norms? How do I get students doing more verbally and non-verbally, doing gestures, doing actions, repeat after me, say it with me, choral read, all those little things that make it easier for teachers to see that, oh, this is something that I can add to my practice. Then on top of that layer, start doing things like really thinking about your checking for understanding. Do you have opportunities to see if students are getting it as the lesson is still going? And if they're not getting it, knowing that you do need to go back and reteach. And that's where the dynamism really falls together. It's like you need to be ready to respond, to adjust, to go back, turn on a dime, as you said, so that that data you're collecting when you're doing a mini whiteboard or when you're doing a pair share or a cold call, that it really does go somewhere. It's not just, oh, that's not quite working well, keep going. Like having a strong lesson structure is only the start. You actually really need to have excellent CFU. Zooming out again, the next thing I'd say is that next layer is thinking about, have I done the proper lesson? I've done my CFUs. I'm doing lots of interaction, lots of engagement norms, but have I actually structured this lesson well enough? Do I have an adequate lead in where they can do some practice, some review or retrieval practice from the previous lesson? Have I connected that previous skill or concept with everything that they've been doing so far? Do I have adequate teacher models before I get them to practice themselves? Am I throwing them in the deep end too soon? Have I given them lots of guided practice? So opportunities to get back and forth interaction between the teacher and the students on the mini whiteboards or with their partners before they go off and do a task. Because if you don't have those parts of the lesson working well, there's nothing you can do really to get them to work better independently at the end, when you might want to pull a group and do a small group instruction whilst others are completing a task or moving on to, say, reading fluency together. So the other layer that I add on top of that, especially if you're still skeptical, because you still might be wondering, yeah, but you're still just teaching one group at a time. How are you catering for all of that need? The reason I started with all those other things is the first step to becoming an adaptive and responsive teacher that can cater for need and make sure it's not one size fits all in a whole class environment is to first of all teach really, really well. Have a solid lesson, have solid practices, solid techniques that you're able to use. Be adaptive, be dynamic, ready to respond and adapt, and be the teacher that the students need you to be in that moment. Then the next tiny layer that I would add there, and we can probably round out our discussion of layers because there's just so many. The next layer there that helps those teachers that are currently doing all of those things, but still having that awkward moment where some students have finished the question and are waiting, and other students are trying their best to try and access that question. And you sort of think, this is where my differences between my students are coming out, and I don't know quite how to fix this. When schools have come to me with that challenge, what I get them to think about is the idea of increasing levels of challenge for every question and for every independent task that you give. Something that helps teachers to get their head around it is the idea that every task or question in your lessons should start with a mild version. So if you're spelling, you might be getting them to spell the VC word to begin with. So just a vowel and a consonant. Nice and easy. 2 sounds we're looking for. Everyone should be able to get that on their whiteboard and feel successful, for example. If that's the mild, then the medium is going to be a little bit more complexity. Maybe there's another consonant there. Maybe there's 2 more consonants. But essentially, students do the mild one first, or a few of the mild. Then they do some medium level challenge questions if they have time, but not everyone will have time. And that's actually okay. And then for those students that are just on the ball, loving it, so fast, so quick, there's always more for them to do. So have some spicy items, some spicy questions, some spicy words up your sleeve. So you can either show them for them to use or to write about, or you can give them verbally as a bonus word or as an extension. And what I love about this paradigm, as opposed to here's a high, medium, and low lesson or high, medium, and low task, is that students don't have to know which group that they're in. And in fact, the groups might change. So you don't even need the concept of group really, except for responsively formed groups at the end of the lesson. So my biggest win, I think, that I can get across the line is always start your lessons and your every question and CFU question you have with that mild, then increase the gradient of difficulty as the questions or the tasks go on within that same time frame. And if you've got 2 minutes for students to write that word down on the whiteboard or finish that sentence or answer that question, some students will just do this one, the mild. Some students will do the mild and medium. Other students will do all 3. And for me, that's the way you get across the line of using your time brilliantly, keeping the accelerator on, but ensuring that everyone's got that soft start and low floor to begin with.
Excellent. Excellent. Which means I love how you were saying we need to reduce the cognitive load of the teachers. And so having a lesson design that is consistent, dependable, then
And
we
has
know
that
what we're
built
going
into
to
it, maybe.
next,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Differentiate the questions while we're inside of the teaching.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be, whiz bang, like, incredibly complicated. It's just the idea that your first question is always going to be easiest so that everyone in the class is successful. Then you are catering for those students who just need more opportunities to practice and consolidate. They're really just focusing on that foundational question or foundational word. Whilst others are going, yep, smash, 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 spell, 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 word, 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 sentence, 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 and then they're on to the medium or the spicy version. But you haven't had to do anything because it's all there on your board. It's all there on the screen if you've got a PowerPoint, for example. And it means that you can be more responsive to those kids that are just stuck on that first word or stuck on the second word. And you don't leave the other ones waiting for 2 or 3 minutes while you finish that cycle of a CFU question.
The thing that I really love about this discussion is that this speaks to being intentionally inviting. I remember Marzano back in the day when we were changing in Washington State, we were changing the teacher evaluation and principal evaluation system. And Marzano was one of the 3 research institutes that was training everybody on instructional pedagogy. And so the individual from Marzano said, what we need to be is intentionally inviting, not unintentionally inviting or intentionally disinviting or unintentionally disinviting, but intentionally inviting for students.
So everyone is welcome to the lesson, to the learning. There's no one who's been given a special pass to a special activity and other kids don't get that pass. Yeah, I love that. I've actually framed this problem of, small group instruction, which is seen as more inclusive or more differentiated, as actually being somewhat exclusive. Because you've decided certain kids get invited and other kids don't. And I think that's a problem that you've set up in your classroom just by trying to cater for that difference.
I can't smile any bigger.
That's always a good sign when your face hurts.
How about this one? Okay, we have seasoned teachers. What should seasoned teachers keep front and center in their practice this year? Could it
Front and
possibly be growing capacity and sharing expertise and intentionally including everybody to the conversation about what good instruction is?
If you are nailing it, if you feel like, "Oh, I've got all of these techniques and I'm really confident with this part of my curriculum or this part of my teaching," it is, it's selfish not to share it. So being willing, being open to having your classroom doors open to your colleagues is a gift that you can give. So if you feel like there's great strides that you've made in your professional learning, if you feel like there's things that you've figured out about teaching, don't be afraid to share it. And in fact, take that professional obligation the way that doctors or engineers or architects do, and share that good practice around. When doctors, when credible surgeons, just to use a medical analogy, are at the top of their field, they are obligated to share and to mentor and to apprentice. They can't just keep it to themselves. It's built into the system that master doctors or master medical practitioners actually share that knowledge down with those who are still figuring it out or still coming along. And they've got formal structures for that. But in your own school, you could either have formal or you could just start informal structures. Just be willing for that teacher who's struggling with a tricky class or not quite sure how to meet all of those needs or getting pushback with behavior or with parents, for example, giving them a chance to see you in action, whether it's live or whether it's a brief recording that you could give them, just so that they can continue being with you and learning with you. Because this is how we grow. This is how we become a profession that really supports each other and supports itself. And there isn't, a cookie cutter of, I'm just going to copy exactly what that teacher has done. It's actually not even possible to do that. What is always going to happen when you're sharing practice is everyone's going to take in what they see and take in what they like and then make it their own. And if you ever feel like something you've implemented isn't your own, then your work is now beginning. I've got to make it feel like my own. I've got to find my groove. I've got to feel good about this. I've got a little post I did last year, not too long after the one size fits all post last year on the Cognitorium blog. And we talked about how when you first implement techniques, people critique the techniques or the practices as feeling quite robotic. And it's like, I feel like an automaton, like I'm not myself anymore because I have to teach in this specific way. But that's just the initial awkwardness of learning anything. Whenever you learn something new, whenever you're starting to master a new way of working or a way of being, it is going to feel awkward because your brain and your working memory is overloaded. You're trying to think through all the bits and pieces. You're trying to make sense of what you're seeing. You're trying to problem solve issues you've never had to problem solve before. But this is the fun part. This is when you can make teaching your own and to find, hacks, find clues, find ways of solving those pedagogical challenges that we're bombarded with in the classroom in order to just be the best possible educator you can be. So I'd say be willing to share, know that the learning always continues, and that if you feel like, I've been doing this for a long time, but I'm still not owning it, this is your time to just get it right for yourself.
That would be very helpful. Thank you for that. So let's go into being a dad. How many kiddos do you have?
We have 2 kids, and my wife and I are working our hardest to be the best possible parents that we can be. So we're about to have 2 birthdays. They do double birthdays. We don't do a party every year because it's a bit much to organize. I don't know if that's allowed culturally to not do a birthday party every year, but we do like a small thing one year, and then we're doing the whole extravaganza this year. They've got all their friends coming, got family. They're turning 7 and they're turning 5. And my son, who's 7, is in first grade, and he just loves school. And I feel like if I've achieved nothing else, he's well adjusted. He's feeling good about school. He has, a good time making friends and making new friends and connecting with lots of people. And he also just has a huge love for reading. My daughter is about to start kindergarten next year. We're 6 months behind the academic year in the States. And we are really thrilled for her because she's already shown a great interest in reading. There's nothing that she loves more than curling up with a book, even though she's only reading a few little words at the moment. And I feel like, although it's a struggle, and parents who are listening to this might know it is a struggle to be a great parent and to try and have a profession at the same time. But we're doing our best every day to give them those amazing experiences, to give them quality time, and to basically set them up for success in their life. And we see that as our primary job. And the other things that we do, like working with schools or earning money, that's just a secondary thing to support our primary work as parents, if you like.
Well, thank you for checking in with us regarding your family. Last year on the podcast, I remember you speaking about your son and how he was reading well, and you were talking about different things. And so
Oh, and he's
perhaps,
like,
yeah.
exactly. He's graduated off the decodable books. He's onto little chapter books. He's a big fan of the completed works of Dr. Seuss, and is really getting into Harry Potter, for example. So we're up to the 5th book of Harry Potter. We do a read aloud every night with both kids. And, in Orlando, we had the great pleasure of going to the Harry Potter section of Universal, and it was amazing because, literature is a window into other worlds. And then they've got these amazing experiences where you can then literally go into the world that you've created in your head. So look, we're doing well. My son's reading is going brilliantly. Thank you for checking in. We couldn't be more excited, I guess, to be parents at this time when I'm trying to get my head around the very best approaches that schools and teachers can use. And I'm really lucky as well that my son's school is willing to keep evolving and keep sort of journeying in this way. And they're keen to sort of work together to see if I can be of help as a hopefully not an annoying parent.
That's wonderful. So next year at this time, if you come back to open up for season 3, then we'll have the check-in to see
I'll
how
be
your
able to
kids
tell
are
you
doing.
all the things that are happening. And my daughter's literacy learning at that point will be really interesting. I'll be able to tell you about her spelling, her handwriting, whether she's successfully making the transition to long vowels and multi sort of consonant sort of syllables. It'll be fascinating. You'll love it.
It will be fun. We look forward to it. So let's talk about the book. I know
Yes.
that our listeners are eager to hear more. What content do you find that is really resonating with readers? What's the feedback? What are people saying? Oh my goodness, this is amazing. This part especially.
The overwhelming feedback I have to say is that people say it's an easy read. They really enjoy picking it up. Some people say they can't put it down. They just really enjoy the way that I worked with the publisher to lay it out. There's lots of feedback about how there's a lot of new content in there. There's a lot of new ideas about how learning happens in the brain, about how to make better instructional decisions because of things like cognitive overload or the forgetting curve and things like that. But the feedback is that because I've laid it out in such a way that those key terms are defined for you in the margins and with little definitions on the side, and that we keep coming back to those concepts in different ways in different stories, that people's feedback has actually blown me away, that it's done the job that I thought it would do. It's not anywhere near a definitive guide to this work or to all of the breadth of knowledge within the science of reading or learning. But what I've achieved and what I hope that it continues to do for people is get them in the door and get them over the line. So your skeptical colleagues, your principals who are sitting on the fence, your mum who you keep having fights about pedagogy with. This is the book to give them, to bring them into this conversation. Because people listening to this podcast, we're probably way down the rabbit hole now, thinking about the science of reading, about effective teaching, about whole class instruction. But for a lot of people, they're teetering on the edge and not quite aware of this big conversation that's happening around the world. So this book is the bridge to get you from where you are now to where you want to be. And I'm hoping it connects you with an incredible collection of other books, podcasts, people that are doing incredible work like yourself, Dr. Bain, so that people feel like, oh, I know what my next step is.
It's fantastic. So here's a question for you. What was one of the most enjoyable parts to write in harnessing the science of learning?
I really enjoyed this chapter 5, which is all about misconceptions of teaching. And in that chapter, we look with Dr. Zach Rochelle, we look at 4 big misconceptions we see about how people think about their instruction. One of them is on whole class teaching, being not being one size fits all. Another one's around ensuring that you actually teach first and you don't expect students to have to figure things out and teach themselves. And that the environment is a location of learning, necessarily the best source of learning. That's you as the teacher. You're the source so that you can be the best instructor possible rather than assuming kids can figure it out. And a few other ones there around why, drilling students in creativity and collaboration opportunities without building deep knowledge and deep language skills is probably not the best approach. And I loved writing that section. I think it's satisfying to try and articulate what I think what stories that people have been told or sold around these misconceptions so that they can actually think critically about their practice and go, you know what, I can let that go. I don't mind occasionally being the sage on the stage if it means that I can be the best person in this lesson. Doesn't mean I'm saging it up all day, as I say in the book, but it does mean that I know when to take control of the lesson. I know when to explain something versus when I want to question and ask. So I think that section was really satisfying. And the feedback has been from people that they found that chapter really enlightening to put their finger on some of the barriers that they've had in their school or classroom improvement.
Excellent. So here's another question for you. Are there any sections that you would like to draw people's attention to that perhaps it hasn't gotten as much airtime on podcasts, et cetera? Is there anything that we're missing that you would like people to see a little bit more?
I've had many an opportunity in a few different places and a few different podcasts to talk about what I think is nearly the entirety of the book.
Okay,
But
good.
I think, but it's a great question. I think I would love to draw people's attention, especially if you are a school leader or if you're working closely with your school administration, to think about the chapter on science of learning leadership. This is something I wrote with a local principal here called Stephen Kapp, who's the most incredible sort of articulator of this research and also a leader of practice, and has done this turnaround thing of changing a school from status quo to excellent, in 2 different schools now. We wrote this chapter on science of learning leadership, essentially to break down the work of the school leader into manageable chunks. So a little bit like cognitive load theory for leaders. And we basically tried to lay out the space that in order to help your teachers improve, you need to give them time, space, and resources to get really good at teaching. So that's enacting the teaching practices you want them to do, because that's hard, like we've been talking about. And then also to optimize the content that they've got. So to get the curriculum exactly right, to get the materials right, to think about the way that their literacy block works. And that actually, the teething issues in those aspects could be the stumbling block for a lot of school journeys. The other 2 aspects that we talk about in this little model, it's a science of learning leadership model. The other 2 ones are essentially protect the attention of those teachers and those learners that they're working with by making sure that you take care of everything else in the school. Don't let little things become big things and distract all the great work that's happening in the classroom, because that should be the school's main game. We don't want to get wrapped up in all of these big sort of cross-school issues or problems with attendance, problems with too many sort of special days and special excursions and special everything. Like, actually give enough time so that teachers have time to be their very best in class time. And the other things you can do to make the change process smooth, as we've been talking about, is mapping out your professional learning and increasing the amount of support. So if you know there's students that need intervention, give them that intervention. Set up your multi-tiered system of support and ensure that those kids that will need tier 2 or tier 3 can get that support, and it complements what's happening at tier 1. So that chapter lays it out for you. As a school leader, it gives you lots of case studies of how schools have gone about this kind of work. And I think this is the conversation that we have. And I've got a course that I'm doing on Friday. I'm really excited to do. It's a second iteration of something with the Academy of School Leadership here in Victoria, Australia. And the course is all about school leaders, so principals, assistant principals, deputies, becoming what I call a hands-on leader. So not hands-off, not sort of saying, well, the curriculum leader can do that, the instructional coach can do that, the maintenance person can do that, I'll just sort of be the CEO. No, actually being a hands-on leader that knows intimately about the teaching approaches, the curriculum choices, the classroom environment, the teaching practices, all of those things, so that they can make good decisions about who to hire, who not to hire, which programs to bring in, and how to make sure that they're being brought in with fidelity and that people feel supported. So a hands-on leader is what we want people to be. And that chapter on science of learning leadership in the book, Harnessing the Science of Learning, is the place to start, I think.
Beautiful. I know people will be running to that. I could name a few right now. Meredith.
Cool.
Meredith,
Dog people in.
you're listening. Meredith, that's you. You're a hands-on leader. As we close, I cannot believe that we're coming to a close already. The last time we came to a close, I said, would
Break
you
it in
like
two,
to
yeah.
speak? Yes. And then do you remember I invited you to speak to the Reading League?
Oh my God, that
Washington?
Reading League,
Isn't that so cool?
that was the brilliant opportunity. That book club was the first that
Okay.
I've done.
Yes.
And with Washington State chapter of the Reading League, I was so honored to work with those incredible people in Washington State. And thank you for that introduction, and thank you for that chance to see what a book club might look like. I've since done 3 or 4 more book clubs with people around the world. There's apparently lots of these happening in Canada. There's various groups in the US and other parts of Australia. And I've been blown away by, how a book club like that could be so powerful. So yeah, as we close, have you got another book club idea for me, Staci?
I do not have another book club for you, but I will think of some other ideas. As we close, if you could wave your magic wand and change one thing about how schools across the globe approach literacy, what would it be? What is the one thing that keeps you up at night? Like, we're just not getting this right. This one piece, if I could just wave my magic wand, what would that be?
I would want teachers to have the knowledge, the expertise, and the power to really understand that when you teach literacy well, when you teach it in the best possible way, it is structured. Structured literacy is what it's called, but it's not rigid. And I think that's the message that's often lost, and where teachers don't have that know-how yet, don't have that flexibility to say, you know what, I know this back to front. I know how to adapt this. I know how to make it work for right now, not for last year or next year, right now in the moment with my students. So structured but not rigid is the war cry that I'm using at the moment to help people to grapple with this time and space, where a lot of people are using great materials, a lot of people are getting their heads around the right things, they're adopting the right programs, but they still might feel like they're losing themselves or they're losing their autonomy. And I'm telling you now, you are in control of your lesson. The curriculum doesn't dictate what you're teaching, you dictate what you're teaching and how you're teaching it. And if we can have that mantra of, yes, it is structured, it's more structured than you've probably ever coped with in your life, but it doesn't mean it's rigid. It is for you to make the lesson come to life every single time.
Every single time. Slay it. We say slay it.
That's right. We have to slay it.
Interactive, slay it, diagnostic, think on your feet.
Love
I
it.
love that. That is so great. That magic wand is perfect.
Fantastic.
Dr. Swain, I do have one. I do have a closing thing other than, no, I don't have another Reading Lake Washington book study. But would you like to come back onto this podcast at some point in time before season 3? Maybe we could do
I
a
would love
mid-year
that.
check-in. Would that be good?
A mid-year check-in sounds amazing. We could talk
Okay.
about all the cool things that you're doing with your schools. I wouldn't mind asking you some questions about the amazing work that you do in the classroom. I'm sure you get to show little pieces of that on your podcast when you have different guests. But I think sharing, shooting the breeze about the way that we work with schools and the way that we help, teachers achieve their best, I think would be so amazing. And, I'll be thinking about this for the next 3 months or 4 months, and we can have a chat either this side of Christmas or the next side of Christmas. And it would be great to contribute to another episode of season 3.
That sounds great. We cannot wait to have you back. And that back and forth exchange sounds fun.
Awesome.
I learned so much from you every single time I'm in your space. Your brain is so gigantic. I love how much information you have to share. So thank you again for your generosity, for your time, for all of the effort that you are bringing to this international effort to ensure the right to read and write for every single student. It is an honor again to be with you in this space. I know that you continue to inspire people across the globe, and I could not be more grateful for your service to others. So Dr. Swain, thank you. And then to all the listeners, make sure that you check the show notes so that you could see about Dr. Swain's book, where to get it, how to connect with his online courses that are going to be coming up, maybe how you can jump into one of the book studies coming up. Do you have a book study coming up? Did you say?
Actually, that's where I'm housing the next book study is on Luminary. So look out for that. Best way to sort of partner your reading time or your unpacking of the book with a community of other educators doing the same thing. So I'm really excited about Luminary and meeting your learning needs no matter where you are in the world.
That is absolutely brilliant. Chef's kiss, Michelin star, 5 out of 5. I love that.
I'll come back tomorrow. Yeah, sounds great.
Sounds great.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor. And right back at you, Dr. Staci Bain. It is always a pleasure to speak to you. Your questions are on point, and it speaks to that work, that, on the ground, meaty, hard yard sort of work that you're doing with your schools and with your teachers. And I know that we both share that authentic love of the magic that can happen when, it all works in the classroom. Thank you for having me today.
High five from the United States to Australia and back.
There we go.
Thank you, Dr. Swain. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. You too.